Okay. All right, so you should be live now.
Hey, hi guys. Really good to see you. Good to actually see you. It's fantastic. I'm really super pumped to be here talking with you guys. It brings so many of my favorite things together to be here with you. Youth taking action, love it. Environmental advocacy, I'm all about it. We get to talk about a whole bunch of great things. Slam poetry and spoken word. We get to talk about some of the adventures that have happened through that, which is great. My 6-year-old dressed me today. I told him what I was going to be doing later, and he told me I should wear my fish shirt because we're going to be talking about things that have to do with the environment and its protection. And he was very strongly opinionated that I should be wearing my fish shirt. I did upgrade with a little bit of a sweater vest, but he liked it. He liked what we had going on. I'm really excited to be talking to you guys today. I don't exactly know how all the systems look at Snazzy. Thanks. That's a nice thing to say. I feel snazzy now. I have to admit, I'm not hugely good at please, please, please feel free to just jam in the comments section whenever you like. I'm very Hufflepuff with things like this, so there's no real super rigid structure that we can't sort of swing as we go and sort of have different conversations. Very pumped to be here, sort of, kind of in Delaware. I was just talking to Tracy as well, and other people today, saying that I'm super excited to be traveling to Delaware, even though I can't travel to Delaware right now. And that's kind of the biggest disappointment, is that I can't actually be there with you, because I would like to explore Delaware. I hear good things. I hear good things. So I'm going to share my screen with you, because I want to show you a few things. I want to walk you through a few things. So we're going to talk today about using slam poetry to make your case. We're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like as we go. But what you're going to need at some point is that I actually am going to get you to write today. Coming to a conference to learn about how to best, excuse me, how to best advocate. It doesn't really make sense that somebody would just talk at you for the whole time. It is really important to me that you actually get writing as well. So whatever you love writing in or on, if you're somebody who has paper and a pen, if you're like an old school person like me and you like writing with paper and pen, great. If you're somebody who likes taking notes in their personal electronic devices, that's great too. If there's a person next to you and you want to write on their arm with pen, as long as it's consenting, that's fine. It's whatever you want to write on. I am going to ask you to write in a little bit, which is great. So we're going to talk using slam poetry to make your case today. And you'll have to forgive me as well, because I want to share my screen, but I also want to be able to see what I'm doing. So you'll be able to see the PowerPoint stuff that I'm doing here. So if that bothers you, if you're somebody who's very high tech, who's currently yelling at the screen about how I'm using PowerPoint incorrectly, my apologies. So this is me. This is Mike Johnston. Excuse me. I am a teacher by day. I'm also a champion slam poet. I've won a whole bunch of slams and a whole bunch of spots. I am a spoken word artist, which is the non-competitive aspect of slam poetry, which we'll talk about in a little bit. I also work in the education department at National Geographic. I'm one of the mentors there. This is me standing in the National Geographic rectangle that we have there, the classic. Here I am doing actually some poetry at National Geographic, which is really neat, because this is only a few feet away from the room where it happened, so to speak, the room where they actually all got together for the first meeting of National Geographic and made some big decisions about what that would look like all those years ago. Really fantastic, phenomenal thing to be. So I want to talk about advocacy today, because that's kind of what we're talking about. Excuse me, I've got this little tickle in my throat. Very unprofessional. Very unprofessional. I'm sorry. So we're going to talk about advocacy. Advocacy, by definition, is looking for public support or recommendation, public support for or recommendation for a cause or policy. So getting people behind something that is important, either something that needs support or needs a change or whatever else. But realistically, the way I see advocacy is you caring enough about something to actively try to engage, to actively try to convince others to care about it with you, right? So it's trying to make caring infectious. It's trying to make sure that whatever it is that you are passionate about gets infected, so to speak, in other people, gets sort of grounded to the bones of what they're doing, and they get on board with your passion. So that's what we're sort of looking at today, is about that caring, that level of passion, that level of trying to convince others to care in the same aspects that you do. This is one of the things that I care the most about. This is the one of the pieces of Galapagos. The Galapagos Islands absolutely changed the way I see a lot of things. I was sent out there by National Geographic. This is a beautiful, beautiful little spot full of a whole bunch of little stories. I could sit here all day and tell you how this spike, I actually went diving down here. If you can see my little arrow moving, one of the best dives of my life right down in this pocket. There used to be a second rock spike right here. And a lot of these pock marks on the ground that you can see, these big craters, is actually from board pilots in World War II. And they came through and they were bombing the ground because they had nothing else to do and they were target practicing. There's actually still shells down there. Interesting things. So I care about the Galapagos because it's the best kind of crazy. It's the absolute best kind of crazy. I believe that the Galapagos represents the big-hearted things that people can do to really try to change the things that were going on before. So we have not been great to the planet thus far, and I don't think anyone would argue that we've been fantastic to the planet. Some of it was ignorance and some of it's choice. But the Galapagos is a spot where we are actively making these choices to try and do phenomenal new things, really interesting things. And this border here, the dots around here, that represents a marine reserve. Okay, and I could tell you, I could tell everyone how important the Galapagos is by talking about the fact that it's one of the largest and most biodiverse MPAs, or marine protected areas, on the planet. At 133,000 kilometers squared. That's impressive enough. You could tell somebody that and say, this is worth fighting for because of the scale of what it is. It's a massive space, and it's worth fighting for because there are not a lot of spaces like it. Sure. I could even make it more personal, and I could tell you about Delaware. That's a place where I am right now. So that makes a little more sense to me, because I'm assuming not a lot of you have gone to the Galapagos Islands, right? So I've got that level of connection already. I'm trying to tell you it's important because it is. I'm trying to tell you it's important because it's big and unique. All those things are true. Absolutely. I could use fun facts, stats. That's something that people do often when they're trying to make a point about their advocacy. Statistics, very important. Articles, very important. People Google search things and try and build a sense of urgency and importance in their message. I could use articles, news clips to show the global scale of importance, right? We all do this when we're trying to fight for things. We look for reasons why. We look for statistical pieces why that would make sense, right? Fun facts like this one. There's over 800 species of mollusks and myriads of fish species can be found in the Galapagos Islands. I practiced that, and it just didn't come. It's not coming out on the tongue. But it's a cool little fun fact. And all I did for this was Google search fun facts about the Galapagos. I could tell you that the Galapagos Islands are the only place that penguins can breed in the Northern Hemisphere. That is a fun fact because people like penguins and they're adorable. And often people are very surprised that these penguins exist outside of an Arctic setting, right? Outside of a cold setting. I've actually been in the water with these guys. I can tell you that they're very playful. A little penguin just like this stole a piece of my diving equipment, and it was endearing. I liked him very much, even though I did never recover that piece that he stole. I could give you a whole bunch of really neat stats about some things that I found around there and some neat factoids about how Galapagos marine iguanas are the only marine iguanas on the planet. They're the only iguanas that can swim, so they're worth protecting for that. And it's really neat that they live in symbiosis with two other animals that are also exclusive to the Galapagos. They live in symbiosis with the Galapagos hawk and the Galapagos mockingbird. And there's also a species of Galapagos shark that feeds on these marine iguanas. So all these things living together, and it's a really neat relationship that they have because we've got the mockingbird that picks sea salt off of the iguanas and they bask in the sun. And then if a hawk comes by, the mockingbirds get upset and they screech, and that's a warning sound to all the iguanas and they scatter. So it's a really neat piece of existence, right? And all those things are just things that you can Google, right? Things that you can know just by reading about them. And that's good. That's important for advocacy. These are all valid, meaningful reasons to protect areas like the Galapagos. You could fight for the Galapagos just based on Googleable things. I don't know if Googleable is a word, but we're gonna make it a Googleable word. We're gonna make it a word. Googleable is now a word. Okay, and these are all valid. But here's my question. All of this, being that it is Googleable, okay, is really the difference between a singular plastic bottle and 6,600 poached sharks. And this is where it gets confusing. I know. This is where my presentation seems like it doesn't make sense because it's all a bunch of slides about the Galapagos and about factoids and information. And then all of a sudden, I put out a slide that doesn't make sense with a question that doesn't make a ton of sense. How can a singular plastic bottle mean more than 6,600 poached sharks? I'll tell you. But first, I got to tell you what slam poetry and spoken word is. Just a really quick, brief thing. Slam poetry is competitive. Okay, so slam poetry is when poets prepare a spoken piece of poetry, and there are judges. There are 5 judges in the room, and you deliver your piece of poetry, and other human beings score you on a scale of 1 to 10 for how good they think your poetry is. And that's the slam poetry aspect of things. But really, slam poetry is the competitive branch of something called spoken word. Now, spoken word is a beautiful form of poetry. It's like this wonderful, enveloping storytelling that what you do is when you write things, when you are writing things and when you are planning things, it's with a specific intention for performance. So spoken word is putting words together and putting ideas together in terms of how you're going to present it. And they're doing these wonderful mini monologues that you're actually presenting to people. So, so what I'm saying here is that spoken word is all about taking your experience and challenging yourself to connect it to other people, really sort of bringing them into this massive moment here. Can you guys see my face? Like, is my face on the top of the screen for you as well? Okay, good. Because I just realized, I was like, if I'm screen sharing, I've never worked with this system before. So I was just like, man, I'm trying to make my face super interesting when I'm talking here. But if I'm just sharing a PowerPoint, I've just wasted all of my fish shirt for the whole session here, but I digress. I do that a lot. I go off on tangents a lot. So spoken word is the idea that you're going to be writing not with the intention of having published words put on a piece of paper, but you are writing with this idea that what you are going to put down on paper is eventually going to be destined to be presented, to be spoken, to be given to people in a way that they can see it in your face and see it in your hands and see it in the curves of your mouth and your expression and the fact that you cared enough to wear a fish shirt because you knew it was going to be visual and because your 6-year-old told you it was a good idea. So as much as I love poetry, and I do, on the other side of this computer that I'm using right now is my library. And in that library, I'd say about half of the books are poetry books. About our other half is like young adult books because, you know, my oldest kid is 12 and she's a monster for reading as well. But I could read poetry all day. But I love the idea of spoken word because you have to care about that connection. You have to care about real people interacting with other real people. So here's my answer. Slam poetry and spoken word essentially is the difference between tasting salt. When I traveled to the Galapagos, I had never been more inspired by a place in the world. I had never been more inspired by something natural and wonderful that, when left to its own devices, could be something massive. And I ran poetry workshops on an adventure vessel in the Galapagos, a huge scientific vessel. And the people who were on that vessel wrote poetry with me. And I talked a lot to them about the idea of using your 5 senses to bring people into your moments. And we did a session after getting back on one of the Zodiacs. And the Zodiacs are these little rubber boats where sea spray is constantly hitting you in the face. And everyone that was in that session with me kept on talking about the taste of salt on their lips and the taste of salt coming down their face, or like the salt that had been left there, and then the drips coming down, and just the taste of salt. And I thought that was a wonderful, beautiful thing because people know the taste of salt. So even if you've never been to the Galapagos or you've never been to the ocean, you understand salty. Now, I was getting, pretty intrigued by hearing the same thing over and over again. And then there was one person, a younger person, who was on the boat with her family, and she had a disgusted face on the whole time. And not just because she was like somebody who had like a bitter attitude. She had a great attitude. But she had this little face on the whole time. And eventually I came to her and I said, okay, what's going on? What do you got? And she said, I was on the same boat as everybody else. And when you asked me to write things down, I wrote about the salt. I did. But everyone else here is writing about how the salt is so wonderful and natural and they can taste it, and that's beautiful. But I think I did my poem wrong. And I said, that's not really a thing. You can't really do poems wrong. That's the beauty of them. And she said, I wrote down that I hated the taste of that salt on my lips. I hated it so much because the salt taste on my lips reminded me of fast food, overly salted back home. And it just reminded me how quickly you could take a place like the Galapagos Islands and cut it into small pieces and sell it off in salted containers to people. And that was the most beautiful thing that came out of that session, because it made me understand that tasting salt is something that can be connective, but also something that can be really, really differentiating its definition, right? So this girl had the taste of salt like everyone else did, and everybody else wrote how great it was that they could remember, and they knew the taste of salt on their lips. But for her, it was a whole different experience. And for me, that was the most beautiful piece of slam poetry. That was the most beautiful piece of spoken word, because she expressed to everyone with this. You could see the pain on her face, that she just remembers eating these fries, and now she could see every little piece, every little fish and every little plant was something you could just put salt on and sell. And it was a really beautiful idea. These are scalloped hammerhead sharks. I did not take this picture. I had to Google this picture. But this is what it looked like for me. I love sharks. Love them very much. I was in the water with about 200 scalloped hammerhead sharks in the Galapagos Islands because that's their season for mating. It's their season for getting together. And they are the gentlest creatures. Sharks in general are phenomenally gentle. I have interacted with animals around the planet. I like animals typically better than I like people, if I'm being honest. But these guys, so gentle. Sharks in general, so gentle. And around the same time I was in the Galapagos, there was a massive arrest where they took several boats that had been poaching because 155,000 kilometers squared, 21 times the size of the entirety of Delaware, is very difficult to police. So often in the Galapagos, people come in and they poach sharks because shark fins and shark bodies worth a lot in markets that are pretty close to the Galapagos. So while I was in the Galapagos, they made a massive arrest because they hadn't done that before because their government didn't have like a huge legal system to try to defend like a natural spot like that. So I got in the water with these guys, and on the same day that I was in the water with several hundred of these scalloped hammerhead sharks, that was the day that they announced that they had made arrests and that they had pulled these boats up and they had found inside these boats over 6,600 sharks. Now, I apologize for using an image like this, but the images that I had to choose from, this is the least stomach turning if you are an animal fan like me. Now, that is a lot. I can come home and I can tell people it is bad that 6,600 sharks were in the belly of this boat, cut into pieces and sold for soup and medicine. Mostly medicine that doesn't work. I can tell people that and they will know that that is sad. Absolutely. But it doesn't make them care. The thing about statistics, the thing about things like this, is that you read them and they're bad. And everyone knows they're bad. Or everyone knows they're good. Right? There are universal ideas of what things are good and bad when it comes to advocacy. Absolutely. When you look at 6,600 sharks, that is sad. That is heartbreaking. Especially when I found out about that the same day where I had been swimming in and amongst of hundreds of these guys, and as they swim by, I put my hand on their soft bellies, and they're just so curious and wonderful, and they had these big personalities. It sucked to learn. It was hugely difficult to learn. And I come home, and I tell people about what's happening, and people say, that's really bad. And it is. But the thing about bad is that it's too general. It doesn't make people care. So here's the thing. Slam poetry and spoken word is not telling someone that it is bad that you have 6,600 sharks that are cut up in the belly of a boat. They know that that is not good. But they're not really going to change because you're not really selling them a moment. Advocacy is about getting people to care. And things that people can read in the newspaper. There's a great line in a movie called Hotel Rwanda. It's an older movie where they say people are going to read the newspaper. They're going to look up and say, man, this is awful. And they right back to eating breakfast. Young advocates have to stop people from eating their breakfast and connect them with the specificity and connect people with those moments. Is it lagging? Am I lagging? I apologize if I am. I don't know how to fix that if I am. A little. Well, then I'm sorry. Here's what I'd like to give you. The difference, okay, good. I fixed it. I don't know how I fixed it. I just hoped that it would be different, and it was. So there you go. Here's what I want for you to understand. I want you to be the advocates who give people reasons to not just look at a newspaper or a set of stats and go, that's bad, and then just continue on. I want you to give them reason to want to find these moments for themselves. The planet is a very, very cool thing. This Earth can do a whole bunch of things, but the one thing it can't do is actually speak. So that's where it comes to us. I can't take everyone in the world down to the Galapagos Islands, but I can tell them that I spent a day swimming amongst the sharks, and then I spent a day swimming amongst sharks that weren't even born yet. They have a kind of tree there called a mangrove. You may be familiar with mangroves. They grow sort of half in water, and they've got these amazing root systems that grow like fingers and like veins, and they grow out and they make this really protective system. And sharks actually swim into these little keys and put their eggs in and amongst the mangrove. The little keys that they have their babies in. And all these little moments feel so delicate and wonderful and so worth protecting. But I can't put everyone in the water at the same time. But I can tell them that when I came out, after having that moment where I felt the fragility of all these little baby sharks in and amongst the mangroves, I came out, and the thing that I saw for the first time during my trip to the Galapagos was a single plastic bottle. One that had made its way in and amongst these mangroves, despite the fact that there are vigorous rules in this entire reserve. It's 155,000 square kilometers. And yet, even though people are not allowed to use plastics in the same way in that space, a piece of plastic with English writing that had made its way from further up the coast had eventually made its way down to these babies and was sitting in and amongst these mangrove babies. And that's the difference between reading someone the newspaper and telling someone about the impact of why that matters. It's swimming between the scars and generations of whales. I can't take everyone down to the Galapagos to tell them why it's bad to pollute, to tell them why it's bad to not protect these spaces, tell them why it's worth protecting these spaces, but I can tell them about a moment where me and my crew were heading back to our boat and we saw a whale breach. And that in and of itself is amazing. It's beautiful, powerful humpback whale. So we decided to go over and take a peek at her because it's a little bit strange that she is not really where she's supposed to be. And we go over and we take a peek. And we see that this big, beautiful whale has scars that can only have been made by boats, which is difficult. Because in a protective space like that, with a beautiful species like that, you want them to not come into contact with boats. And this mama, she was hurt. And yet, her little tiny whale baby was there with her. Because where else are you going to go? The baby's got to stay with mom. I got into the water, and that's the only time in my life where an animal has moved me from the space that I was. There was a tremendous feeling just being around her and swimming in between her and her baby, where every time she moved, I felt the entire ocean pull and suck and just decide where I was going to be. And I understood in that moment that if we can scar something that big and gentle, and if we can affect where she's going to be in her family situation and directly affect the behaviors of her baby just by existing, just by driving a boat close to where she is enough that she injures herself, that means more than reading a newspaper and letting people know what that is. So yeah, those things are all important, but they don't mean the same as connecting with nature in a very specific way. I can't take you to the Galapagos. I would love to. It's my favorite place. But I can tell you about a seal. I spent a lot of time with seals in the Galapagos. They would come right up. They're pretty fearless. So I would sit on the beach and write poetry And a few feet away, a big old seal will just come flop down and sit in the sun and not really care too much. And it was cute and it was fun. And I would definitely tell people that the Galapagos has a lot of seals and they're really fantastic. But the moment that I use to tell people about the poetry of connection and why advocacy is so important for the environment is that we went there and there was a group of us taking every picture we possibly could, everything being as stunning as it possibly could be. And then the person who is guiding us stops on the ridge and asks us to put our cameras away. And none of us understand why. And then we cross the ridge and we find that one of the seals has given birth and that baby did not make it. And that was less than 24 hours, but the mother was sitting next to her baby. And he says that he sees this all the time. Sometimes things happen and in nature and animals just don't make it. But the mother just wouldn't leave. She needed her moments to grieve. And not only did we respect her enough to not make that into a photographable moment, but that moment connected us to the humanity of what those animals were. So we can read a newspaper, we can Google images, we can Google stats, we can Google facts about why protecting these animals is important, and about microplastics being in the water, and about all the things that global warming is doing. We can do that. But taking someone into a moment that they might not have experienced is the most effective way, the most effective form of advocacy. So that's what I want to tell you today. And that's what I want you to realize, that you have the power to do, that you are more than stats and more than, PowerPoint presentations like this one. You are already an extremely powerful series of stories and this extremely powerful series of reasons to care about the environment. The most important tool that you have in advocacy is your reason why you care enough to fight. That's the most important thing that you have in your arsenal. The most effective way to leverage that is to bring someone else into the moments that made you care that much. That's what I'm trying to give you a little bit of a taste of today, is that you have to care enough to teach other people why you care enough. It's just that simple. And being able to bring them into those stories is the most effective way. I like to say this as like, it's falling in love with a place, with a moment within a place that changes the nature of your advocacy. And you see those moments as something entirely different. I am very, very lucky. I have gotten to travel a ton. And my wife is my best friend, and her and I travel together to a lot of great places, and it's fun. We learn some things, we see some things, we adventure, we take lots of pictures, we toss them up on the Insta. Absolutely. But advocacy, when you care enough to see things differently, when you care enough to open your heart to these things differently, you start to see all of these moments differently. So, for example, after the Galapagos, we went to Churchill, which is this beautiful little northern town here in Manitoba. It's a very, very long trip. You have to go by train for 17 hours, sometimes more, depending on where you get in the train. And you can imagine how comfortable a train is. So spending 17 hours on a train to get there, not the most fun, but an interesting way to get around. And then when you get there, it's called ecotourism, right? You connect to these animals, you get to go on, safaris and look for different animals and everything like that. But when you have this heart for advocacy, when you care about making other people care about the environment, these moments open themselves up to really sort of like seeing everything differently. So these are the Northern Lights. Absolutely stunning. And one of the coolest experiences of my life is seeing the sky catch fire and dance like that. And if you ever have an opportunity to get up north, fully endorse it. I fully endorse it. But it wasn't just about that. We went to go meet beluga whales in the estuary, and we sat in the boat, and they came and they breached right beside the boat. They're just popping their little heads up right beside our Zodiacs, spraying us with water. being playful with us, and it was mind-blowing to be that close to them. And we were wowed enough just being in the boat with them. But then the people driving the boat said to us that it used to be a lot more magical, but the water was all churned up and full of silt. There's dirt in the water because miles and miles away from there, there had been some mining, and the mining had washed a lot of its residue into the water, which changed the entire way that the people could interact positively with these whales in the water. So that's a story that sort of stuck itself out for me. We went searching for these guys, big old polar bears. Churchill is known for being the polar bear capital of the world, they call it. They walk through the town. They sort of do whatever they want. We saw a whole bunch of them. We even met somebody who had been mauled by a bear, and she didn't think it was that big a deal, so she got better and then just went back to work. But when you have the heart for advocacy, when you have this heart for wanting to help people understand more why these moments are worth protecting and sharing, we got to see a whole bunch of polar bears. And it wasn't just about taking pictures. We understood and we listened, and we saw so many polar bear moms who had their babies. And one of the things that we sort of understood, we were told by the people who had worked with them and studied with them, is that when the moms come off of the ice, they are exhausted. They have nothing. They have no energy because they give all of their energies to the baby. And the other thing that's interesting is that the babies will do literally everything the mom does. They mimic every single inch of behavior. They eat what the mom eats. They walk where the mom walks. They do what the mom does, everything. So the way that we approach them had to be very, very delicate, because if you scare them, the mom will run. And the mom is so low on energy that there is a very good possibility that the mom will just wear herself out if she has to run from danger, because they're so not used to the people being there. They're so not used to the situations they're being in that if you spook them, they'll run from that situation. And if they run, they could pass away, just to show that their babies what to do. So they have this huge, tremendous instinct to like even give their own life to protect the kids that they're sort of showing the way to. And one of the problems that had happened was because of the warming that had gone on up there, it changed the timing of the ice, and it changed the timing of getting off the ice, and it changed the timing of interacting with people. And I can't take you all to Churchill, Manitoba. I would love to. Life-changing. But I can talk to you about what it was like to watch a mother and her cubs interact and feel that specific moment where there's that tension of getting too close versus not close enough. That moment where you need to be close enough to experience them, so there's something that you have in your heart, that you have as a part of why you care about the planet, but not to get too close enough that you affect their natural behaviors. So here's what I'd like you to do. I would like to give you an opportunity to be a slam poet. I think we have a few minutes left because we started a little bit late, so I'm going to give you a chance to do this. I understand if you can't stay, if you have a very specific schedule, but I would like to sort of walk through this moment with you here. We have about 10 minutes left. Great. Okay. Thank you, Melissa. I really appreciate this. So I'd like to give you a chance here. So I asked you earlier to have something to write with and on. I'm going to give you about 5 minutes. And in that 5 minutes, usually I would give you 5 minutes just to splash ideas out, right? And then we would sort of rebuild for 5 minutes, and then we would sort of share. But here's what I want you to do. I want you to think of the moment or